September 8, 1945. Yokohama Harbor, Japan. The morning mist clings to the devastated port facilities as USS Missouri's shadow falls across the pier where a small group of Japanese military personnel wait to board. Among them stand three women in Imperial Army uniforms: Lieutenant Hayashi Fumiko, Captain Nakamura Yuki, and Major Watanabe Sachiko. Their faces masks of practiced composure despite the unprecedented nature of their summons. They are intelligence officers, translators, and administrative specialists who had served in the Japanese military's most classified departments, now ordered to assist in the occupation's translation services. As they climb the gangway, an American naval officer, Commander Robert Hayes, extends his hand to steady Major Watanabe on the rain-slicked metal steps. Then he does something that stops all three women mid-stride. He turns to Watanabe and asks, "Major, what's your assessment of the harbor's current defensive capabilities?" The question hangs in the salt air like an unexploded shell. In 4 years of military service, no male superior had ever asked Watanabe for her opinion on strategic matters. Her expertise had been used, her translations valued, her administrative efficiency exploited, but her thoughts, her assessment, her opinion, these had been as irrelevant as asking a typewriter its thoughts on the documents it produced. The presence of women officers in the Imperial Japanese military represented one of the war's many contradictions, a system that simultaneously denied women agency while depending on their capabilities. These women, numbering approximately 2,000 by war's end, had been recruited from Japan's educated classes when the demands of total war overcame traditional gender prohibitions. They served as code breakers, translators, intelligence analysts, and communication specialists, processing information vital to Japan's war effort, while being systematically excluded from any decision-making process about that information. The cigarette, that small paper cylinder filled with tobacco, would become an unexpected symbol of equality in the occupation period. American officers offered cigarettes to their Japanese counterparts regardless of gender, a simple gesture that communicated more about democratic values than any proclamation could achieve. The Japanese women officers had operated within a rigid hierarchical structure that treated their presence as a wartime necessity rather than professional recognition. Despite holding military ranks, they were prohibited from commanding male personnel, excluded from strategic meetings, and required to eat in separate facilities from their male counterparts of equal rank. Their uniforms included skirts rather than trousers, marking them as fundamentally different from real military personnel. Even their salutes were modified, a shortened gesture that acknowledged their military status while emphasizing their feminine subordination. Captain Nakamura, who had decoded American transmissions for 3 years, later testified, "I knew American battle plans before most Japanese commanders. Yet in briefings, I was required to stand behind a screen, invisible, while male officers presented my analysis as their own." The first working session aboard the Missouri shattered every protocol these women had internalized. Commander Hayes introduced them to the translation team, which included Lieutenant Dorothy Chen, a Chinese-American intelligence officer who would be their direct supervisor. The concept of a female superior officer who actually exercised command authority seemed like a translation error. When Lieutenant Chen asked each Japanese woman to introduce herself and describe her specialization, she waited for their responses with genuine attention. Major Watanabe later wrote, "She looked at us while we spoke. Not through us, not past us, but at us. She took notes on our answers. She asked follow-up questions. It was as if our words had weight, occupied space, mattered." The cigarette ritual that followed exemplified the cultural collision. Commander Hayes offered his cigarette case to the group, starting with Major Watanabe as the senior officer present. In Japanese military culture, women officers were never offered cigarettes in professional settings. Smoking was considered masculine behavior, inappropriate for women regardless of rank. Watanabe's hand hesitated over the case, her lifetime of conditioning warring with the realization that refusing might offend. She took one. Hayes lit it for her with the same casual efficiency he showed lighting the male officer's cigarettes. No special attention, no condescension, no surprise, just professional courtesy extended to a fellow officer. The smoke from that cigarette, curling up into the wardroom air, carried with it the dissolution of certainties about gender, authority, and professional worth. Statistical analysis of Japanese military records reveals the systematic marginalization of women officers despite their crucial contributions. Of the 2,000 women serving in officer positions by 1945, not one held a command position over male personnel. Their promotion rate was 60% slower than male officers with equivalent performance ratings. They received 40% less pay than male officers of the same rank. Yet their work accuracy rates, particularly in translation and code breaking, exceeded male units by an average of 15%. Lieutenant Hayashi, who had managed translation services for the Southern Army headquarters, processed an average of 10,000 words daily with a 99.3% accuracy rate. Her male supervisor, who could barely read English, received commendations for his unit's exceptional performance. The American approach to utilizing these women's expertise created immediate practical and psychological disruptions. Within the first week, Lieutenant Chun assigned Captain Nakamura to lead a mixed-gender team reviewing captured documents. The team included 2 male Japanese lieutenants who had previously outranked Nakamura socially despite her higher military rank. The moment Nakamura gave her first directive to the male lieutenants, the room fell silent. One lieutenant looked to Commander Hayes for confirmation that he should follow a woman's orders. Hayes didn't even look up from his paperwork, simply saying, "Captain Nakamura is the ranking officer on this project." The cigarette in Nakamura's hand trembled slightly as she repeated her directive. The lieutenants complied. The opinion-seeking behavior of American officers proved particularly disorienting. During a September 15th meeting about establishing communication protocols between occupation forces and Japanese civil authorities, General Charles Willoughby asked Major Watanabe for her assessment of which Japanese officials could be trusted to comply with occupation directives. Watanabe later described the moment. "I waited for him to tell me what opinion I should have. That's how it worked. Superiors provided the correct thoughts, and we confirmed them. But he actually wanted my genuine assessment based on my experience. I had to construct an independent opinion in real time, something I hadn't done professionally in for years." Her response, tentative at first, grew more confident as Willoughby took notes and asked clarifying questions. The cigarette breaks became informal seminars in democratic interaction. American officers, both male and female, would gather on the deck, smoking and discussing everything from translation challenges to post-war reconstruction plans. The Japanese women officers were initially invited out of courtesy, but gradually became active participants. Lieutenant Hayashi observed, "During smoke breaks, rank seemed to matter less than ideas. A corporal could disagree with a major if they had logic behind their position. Women officers spoke as much as men. It was chaos by Japanese standards, but somehow decisions emerged from this chaos that were often better than those produced by our rigid hierarchical meetings." On September 20th, an incident occurred that crystallized the transformation taking place. During a translation dispute about the nuance of a particular Japanese term related to industrial capacity, Lieutenant Chun deferred to Captain Nakamura's expertise, publicly acknowledging her superior knowledge of technical Japanese. This deferral from a superior officer to a subordinate based on expertise rather than rank was unprecedented in Japanese military experience. More shocking still, male American officers accepted Nakamura's interpretation without question. The cigarette she smoked during the subsequent break tasted different. It tasted like recognition. The American military's integration of female officers, while far from perfect and still limited by 1,940 gender norms, appeared radically egalitarian to Japanese women who had existed in a system of absolute gender hierarchy. The presence of women's Army Corps WAC officers who held actual command authority, made strategic decisions, and were consulted for their expertise rather than merely their translation skills, provided a living counterexample to everything the Japanese women had been taught about female capability and place. Major Grace Patterson, a WAC intelligence officer, became particularly influential. She smoked cigarettes in meetings, voiced disagreements with male superiors, and received the same respect accorded to male majors. Her existence was a walking contradiction to Japanese military ideology. The documentation practices of the occupation revealed another layer of cultural difference. American reports credited individual contributors by name, including women officers. Japanese military reports had systematically erased women's contributions, attributing their work to male supervisors or simply to the translation section. Seeing their names in official American military documents, analysis by Captain Nakamura Translation verified by Lieutenant Hayashi provided external validation that their professional existence mattered. The cigarette breaks where these documents were discussed became ceremonies of professional recognition. By late September, the Japanese women officers had begun to exhibit behavioral changes that worried some Japanese male officers. They spoke more directly, made eye contact during conversations, and most disturbingly, began offering unsolicited opinions during working sessions. Colonel Yamamoto complained to his diary, "The women officers have been corrupted by American informality." Captain Nakamura actually contradicted my translation in front of the Americans yesterday. When I reminded her of proper deference, the American commander supported her interpretation. The natural order is dissolving what Yamamoto saw as corruption. The women were experiencing as professional awakening. The cigarette economy within the occupation headquarters reflected broader patterns of democratization. American cigarettes, Lucky Strikes, Camels, Chesterfields were distributed equally to all officers regardless of gender or nationality. Japanese women officers received the same ration as American male officers. This material equality, unprecedented in Japanese military experience, carried symbolic weight beyond its practical value. Every cigarette smoked represented a small act of equality, a minor rebellion against hierarchies that had defined their lives. Major Watanabe began carrying her cigarette case openly, no longer hiding her smoking as shameful feminine behavior. On October 2, 1945, Major Watanabe was asked to brief General MacArthur's staff on Japanese women's wartime organizations that might resist occupation reforms. She would be the first Japanese woman to formally brief the Supreme Commander's staff. The preparation for this briefing revealed how profoundly her consciousness had shifted. Instead of seeking male approval for her analysis, she consulted with Lieutenant Chun and Major Patterson, forming her own assessment based on evidence rather than anticipated male preferences. She smoked 3 cigarettes while preparing her notes, each one a small ritual of self-assertion. The briefing itself became a watershed moment. Watanabe stood at the front of the room, pointer in hand, cigarette in ashtray, delivering her analysis to a room full of American and Japanese male officers. Her voice, initially trembling, grew stronger as she realized the Americans were actually listening, taking notes, asking substantive questions. When she concluded, General Willoughby asked, "What's your recommendation, Major?" The question required her to move beyond analysis to advocacy, to own an opinion rather than simply present information. Her recommendation to seal up rather than dissolve women's organizations was adopted as policy. She had shaped occupation strategy through her expertise and judgment. The response from Japanese male officers was mixed and revealing. Some, particularly younger officers who had worked closely with women during the war, began to recognize the waste of human capital that gender discrimination represented. Others, clinging to traditional hierarchies, viewed the elevation of women officers as another humiliation imposed by the victors. Lieutenant Colonel Sato wrote to his wife, "The Americans make us take orders from women, even our own women. They offer cigarettes to females as if they were men. The world is upside down," what Sato saw as inversion. The women experienced as correction. The cigarette breaks evolved into something more substantial, informal networks where Japanese women officers could discuss their experiences and support each other through the disorientation of newfound agency. These networks, forming in the smoke-filled corners of occupation buildings, became the seeds of post-war women's professional organizations. Captain Nakamura later founded one of Japan's first professional women's associations, explicitly modeled on the informal equality she experienced during those cigarette breaks with American officers. By October 15th, the transformation in the Japanese women officers was unmistakable. They walked differently, heads higher, strides longer. They spoke differently, voices lower, more modulated, less apologetic. They smoked openly, participated actively in meetings, and most remarkably, disagreed with male colleagues when evidence supported their position. Lieutenant Hayashi wrote to her sister, "I have discovered I have thoughts worth thinking, opinions worth stating, expertise worth recognizing. The Americans showed me this not through propaganda, but through questions, constant questions seeking my opinion, my analysis, my recommendation." Each question was a small revolution. The American officers, particularly the women, were not entirely comfortable with their role as catalysts for consciousness change. Major Patterson confided in her diary, "These Japanese women look at us like we're from another planet. They can't believe we smoke in meetings. disagree with men, make decisions. I want to tell them we're still fighting for equality back home. That what they see isn't perfection, but progress. But maybe it's better they see possibility rather than limitation. Patterson cigarettes, shared with Japanese women officers, became tokens of solidarity across cultural and former enemy lines. The technical expertise of Japanese women officers, once recognized and valued, proved instrumental in numerous occupation successes. Captain Nakamura's understanding of Japanese industrial terminology prevented several serious misunderstandings in economic reports. Lieutenant Hayashi's cultural knowledge helped American officers navigate complex social situations. Major Watanabe's analysis of women's organizations facilitated their transformation into democratic institutions. Each contribution, acknowledged and credited, reinforced their sense of professional worth. The cigarettes they smoked during strategy sessions were no longer symbols of masculine privilege, but tools of professional equality. On November 1, 1945, a remarkable scene occurred. During a joint American-Japanese planning session for educational reform, Major Watanabe disagreed with both General Willoughby and Colonel Yamamoto about the pace of introducing coeducation. She argued, cigarette in hand for emphasis, that rapid change would create backlash, recommending instead a gradual approach with pilot programs. The room fell silent. A Japanese woman officer had just contradicted both American and Japanese male superiors in a public forum. General Willoughby considered her argument, then said, "Major Watanabe makes a valid point. Let's explore her approach. The cigarette smoke in that room might as well have been incense marking a religious conversion, the transformation of a woman from functional tool to thinking professional." The reports these women wrote for the occupation authorities became historical documents of a consciousness in transition. Early reports were passive, deferential, presenting information without interpretation. Later reports included analysis, recommendations, even criticism of proposed policies. The evolution in their writing style from passive voice to active, from description to argument, traced their journey from instruments to agents. Each report was signed with their name and rank, a simple act that would have been unthinkable months earlier. The cigarette rations became currency of a different sort, markers of professional relationships that transcended gender and nationality. When Captain Nakamura shared her cigarettes with a male Japanese lieutenant struggling with translation work, she was enacting a superior-subordinate relationship previously impossible. When Lieutenant Hayashi traded cigarette brands with Lieutenant Chud, they were participating in a friendship between professional equals. These small exchanges, multiplied daily, created new social patterns that would outlast the occupation. By December 1945, the three women officers who had boarded the Missouri in September were unrecognizable in their professional demeanor. They chaired meetings, authored policy recommendations, and managed mixed-gender teams. They smoked cigarettes in briefings without self-consciousness. Most remarkably, they had begun mentoring other Japanese women brought into the occupation administration, teaching them not just translation skills, but professional confidence. Major Watanabe told her proteges, "When they offer you a cigarette, take it. When they ask your opinion, give it. When you have expertise, claim it." This is what democracy looks like in practice. The resistance from traditional Japanese authorities intensified as these women's influence grew. A group of senior Japanese officers petitioned General MacArthur to restrict women officers to translation duties, only arguing that their expanded roles violated Japanese culture and undermined male authority. MacArthur's response was characteristically direct. The occupation will utilize all available talent regardless of gender. Officers who cannot accept female colleagues' expertise are welcome to resign. The petition was withdrawn, but the resentment remained, simmering beneath forced compliance. The cigarette breaks became planning sessions for post-occupation careers. These women, having tasted professional recognition, began imagining futures previously unthinkable. Captain Nakamura planned to attend law school. Lieutenant Hayashi intended to join the Foreign Service. Major Watanabe would enter politics. Each ambition, shared over shared cigarettes, reinforced the other's courage to imagine beyond traditional limitations. The American women officers, particularly Lieutenant Chun and Major Patterson, provided recommendation letters and networking connections, extending democratic solidarity beyond the occupation period. On December 20, 1945, a farewell ceremony was held for the first group of Japanese women officers completing their occupation service. General Willoughby personally thanked each woman, offering them cigarette cases engraved with their names and ranks permanent recognition of their professional identity. Major Watanabe's response speech, delivered in English, she had perfected through months of professional interaction, included a line that captured the transformation. You asked our opinions and then listened to them. In doing so, you taught us we had opinions worth hearing. The cigarette cases, carried back into Japanese civilian life, became talismans of a different way of being. The impact of these transformed women officers rippled through Japanese society. They entered universities, businesses, and government agencies with expectations of professional recognition that disrupted traditional patterns. When told their opinions didn't matter because they were women, they remembered American officers taking notes on their recommendations. When excluded from decision-making, they recalled briefing General MacArthur's staff. The cigarettes they learned to smoke openly became symbols of their refusal to accept invisible status. Years later, in 1950, Captain Nakamura, now a successful lawyer, encountered Commander Hayes at an international conference. He offered her a cigarette, the same casual gesture from 5 years earlier. As she accepted it, she told him, "That first cigarette you offered me on the Missouri wasn't just tobacco. It was recognition that I existed as a professional equal. Every cigarette since has reminded me of that recognition." Hayes, typically American in his response, seemed puzzled that such a simple gesture could carry such weight. The gap between intention and impact revealed how profoundly different systems create different consciousness. The epilogue of this transformation extends beyond individual women to fundamental questions about human potential and social organization. The Japanese women officers had possessed the same intelligence, expertise, and capability before and after the occupation. What changed was not their ability, but their permission to express it, not their competence, but their recognition. The cigarettes they learned to smoke openly were small rebellions against a system that had defined them as servants rather than professionals, tools rather than thinkers. The American officers who asked these women's opinions were not conscious revolutionaries. They were simply applying democratic assumptions about merit and expertise regardless of gender, assumptions still imperfectly realized in their own society but revolutionary in the Japanese context. Every question seeking opinion, every cigarette offered equally, every recognition of expertise accumulated into proof that different organizational principles were possible. Democracy, in this intimate form, was not imposed through proclamation, but demonstrated through daily professional interaction. The transformation from shock to acceptance to expectation traces the arc of consciousness change. The Japanese women officers began by being shocked that anyone wanted their opinions. They moved to accepting that their opinions had value. Finally, they came to expect that their expertise would be recognized and utilized. This progression, accomplished in mere months, revealed how quickly human consciousness can adapt when environmental constraints change. The cigarettes they smoked marked each stage, first with trembling hands, then with growing confidence, finally with casual authority. Today, when we examine how social change occurs, the story of Japanese women officers and American cigarettes offers insights into the mechanics of transformation. Change came not through grand gestures, but through accumulated small recognitions. Each cigarette offered, each opinion solicited, each expertise acknowledged created cracks in the edifice of gender hierarchy. The women didn't need to be convinced they were equal. They needed to experience equality in practice. The cigarettes, shared equally regardless of gender or nationality, became material proof that different social arrangements were possible. In the end, the simple question, "What's your opinion?" proved more revolutionary than any manifesto. It assumed the questioned person had thoughts worth hearing, expertise worth consulting, judgment worth trusting. For women who had been trained to be professionally invisible, these questions were invitations to existence. The cigarettes they learned to smoke openly were external markers of internal transformation, from tools to professionals, from servants to colleagues, from silence to voice. The legacy of those cigarette-scented meetings lives on in the professional expectations of subsequent generations of Japanese women. Each woman who expects her expertise to be recognized, who offers her opinion without apology, who claims her professional space, carries forward the transformation that began when Commander Hayes asked Major Watanabe for her assessment. The cigarettes have long since been smoked, but the consciousness they marked continues to burn. Proof that human potential, once recognized, demands continued recognition. The Yokohama harbor where this story began is now rebuilt. Its docks busy with commercial traffic rather than military vessels. But in the offices overlooking that harbor, professional women work as lawyers, executives, and engineers, their expertise recognized if not yet fully equal. Some are granddaughters of those women officers who learned to smoke American cigarettes and speak their own opinions. They may not know the specific history, but they inherit its legacy, the expectation that their thoughts matter, their expertise counts, their opinions deserve hearing. The cigarette, that small democratic cylinder, had carried more than smoke. It had carried the radical idea that all voices, regardless of the body that houses them, might have something worth saying.